I bet you might have guessed. I bet you might already have guessed what we have to talk about for today, because the last few days, this week at least, we have gotten quite the round of changes for many specs and classes that was quite interesting to talk about, and the changes don't stop as we continue going down this week. So, for today, we have teeny tiny changes to Enhancement, to Hunter, and to Protection Paladin. We have some more substantial changes to Havoc, Demon Hunter, Vengeance, Demon Hunter, Frost, Death Knight, and Holy Paladin. Let's start with the aforementioned teeny tiny things before we get into the juicy parts. First, teeny tiny thing is that Enhancement had got its Windfury nerfed in the chance it had to proc, and Blizzard now has been magnanimous enough to revert the nerf, so now Windfury is back to its original power that we currently have in Shadowlands, to the 20% chance to proc. The other teeny tiny change went to Protection Paladin. Protection Paladin has received already quite a few changes a couple of days ago to its talents. Now there has been a clarification about Holy Shield. Blizzard points out that they are changing Holy Shield to work similar to how physical blocking works, so they point out features like you actually have to have a shield equipped for Holy Shield to work. You actually have to face your enemy, and you can no longer block spells from behind you or from when you're stunned, etc., just like normal block works. There are a few buffs to Holy Shield and a pretty substantial nerf. The few buffs to Holy Shield are that now Holy Shield will allow you to block creatures that deal non-physical auto-attack damage, like, elemental infused auto attacks or on hit attacks from enemies, and also Holy Shield working against attacks that deal combination of physical plus other elements of damage at the same time. That will now also cause Holy Shield to work. The downside of this change is that Holy Shield will no longer allow you to block periodic spell damage. This is the more hurtful of the changes, because there are quite a few mechanics, both in Mythic Plus and in the raid, that causes some pretty sick, pretty nasty debuffs on the tanks. Many mechanics for tanks in the raid, for example, is to take multiple debuffs from a boss until it's too much and you have to taunt swap. Many times this includes some dots on you. Sometimes they are physical damage dots, sometimes they are magical damage dots. Mythic Plus can be the same. Some enemies applying debuffs with dots on you for magical damage. Holy Shield will now no longer allow you to block the periodic spell damage, as it makes sense, right? Blizzard says they want to make it more like a physical block. You can't physically block dots on you, right? If you have Grievous on you, if somebody garrotes you or ruptures you and you're bleeding, you can't block it. You just take it. So they are adjusting Holy Shield to work the same way for Protection Paladin. Last of the teeny tiny changes, this one is a little bit more head scratching, is the teeny tiny change for Hunter about the whole drama surrounding Binding Shot. Blizzard announced the change to Binding Shot was going to be that now Binding Shot was no longer going to be a root. It was no longer going to be rooting enemies permanently, but that instead it would break upon damage. So it was going to basically break the entire point of using Binding Shot, in particular in Mythic Plus, right? As a crowd control, as an extra source of crowd control, different from other types of crowd controls. It was quite useful, especially in weeks where you wanted to kite, for example, right? Binding Shot was very good. Blizzard said, nope, now it breaks on damage. Many hunters complained, so Blizzard changed it very, very quickly. We are changing Binding Shot from a root that breaks to a 3-second stun. This is quite bad and sad. Binding Shot was a very unique tool of Hunter that has existed in the game for over 10 years. Yes, it has changed over time. Previously, if you exited the circle of Binding Shot, you used to get stunned for 5 seconds. So that was good in PvP. The usefulness in PvE, however, was still the fact that you were rooting enemies in place and allowing you to kite them. So changing this to a 3-second stun, which is just like many other AoE stuns, like the leg sweep AoE stun of a monk, the Chaos Nova AoE stun of a demon hunter, the capacitor totem AoE stun of a shaman, then now hunters just have another similar thing and not really anything special anymore. It's definitely better than the nerfed version of Binding Shot with a root that breaks on damage, but now it's still not quite as good, as useful at the end. Now, Now, on to the actual spell changes, class changes, and talent changes for today, starting with Frost Death Knight. We haven't really talked, now that I think about it, we haven't really mentioned Death Knight specs in quite a while, in the amount of changes that they have received. Today, Frost gets a few changes. Blizzard comes out with their, I guess, communication to the player base as to why they are starting with this line of changes, pointing out that Frost has suffered from a lack of choice once a player locked into a specific build. Usually it's a build around Obliteration or it's a build around Breath of Syngergy, making the one or two choices very narrow in the amount of options you have. To help alleviate this issue, the upcoming tree has received new talents, reworked talents, and existing talents moved to more accessible spaces, updated with pathing connections, etc, etc. So as we wait to have the actual completed talent, we can just see the changes themselves that Blizzard is planning to add to the game. The first change is a tiny quality of life improvement. Unleashed Frenzy very early on in your tree used to be stacked up by exclusively Frost Strike. Now instead, Unleashed Frenzy gets stacked by any runic power ability. So this is going to be much more easy to keep up at all times, this 3% strength buff. But what is the change of the day for Frost Death Knight, the more highlight worthy, is that many of the capstones, many of the double choice, dual choice options in the Frost Death Knight 3 are now being split. Now you have those options obtainable at the same time. You no longer have to choose. In fact, pretty much half of all of the choices, all of the double choices on the Frost Death Knight 3 get split in two. The first one is the option between Inexorable Assault and Cold Hearth. So either your talent to buff your Obliterate or your standalone talent to give you a mega large hitting Chains of Ice, now they can be taken at the same time. This is not very relevant, as I said, because Cold Heart is very standalone. It's not that you have a build centered around Chains of Ice that you need this talent for. It's just a one-off type of thing. When it gets more interesting is when you go at the bottom of the tree. One of your last talents is the option between Obliteration and Ice Cap. Now, these two talents are going to be obtainable at the same time. They are no longer going to be a choice. This is definitely more interesting because these two talents are both worth taking. They are both quite interesting and powerful on their own, and it's definitely more valuable to be able to take these two at the same time. Then there has been the last change to your dual option talents. This is the one to Avalanche and Frozen Pulse, because first of all, technically they're not really going to be two different choices because Frozen Pulse is gone. Frozen Pulse is removed from the tree. Blizzard points out that they don't think Frozen Pulse used to offer enough to you to be worth considering, so why not just remove it? Instead, Avalanche now will be a standalone talent and it's going to be buffed. Rather than having this Holding Blast cast, if it was buffed by Rime, dealing essentially extra damage, now also it's going to apply Razor Eyes to your targets if Holding Blast is empowered by Rime, which gets potentially buffed with a new talent, Shattering Strike. When your Frost Strike damages an enemy with 5 stacks of Razor Eyes, it will consume them to deal an additional 60% damage. So these are all of the main standout changes for Frost, but as I said, we don't really have the full tree with all of the other changes for Frost, which are going to be mostly pathing changes, moving the talents around, moving the connections around, which even if it might not look as exciting to you because you don't see new things, you don't see changes in the actual talents, it can actually shake up the way you can build your spec by quite a bit, even just by moving around the talents or by moving around the connections themselves. You can come up with quite some different builds. Then, on to changes we have a little bit more info about. First of all, Vengeance Demon Hunter gets some interesting changes. We have recently talked and praised the increased power for the late game for the scaling of Havoc within the Demon Hunter 3. Things like Any Means Necessary and things like Know Your Enemy were giving Havoc a lot of value to stats like Mastery and Crit over the course of an expansion when your numbers get bigger and bigger. However, Vengeance kind of had the same problem and wasn't really considered in these type of fixes. Why? Because the mastery of vengeance is awful. The mastery of vengeance is fell blood. Now, what this awful mastery does is going to increase your armor bonus of demon spikes by an additional percentage of your agility. What is the problem? Number one, the problem is that even if you are playing very well, demon spikes cannot be taken, cannot be used active at all times. So the uptime of demon spikes is even something like 60%, which means that in 40% of the times you're playing, this mastery does 0 for your defensive power. Nothing, because demon spikes is not active, so your mastery does not work. Why would you even want mastery if the mastery is so weak? Now, even though there are quite some talents in the new Vengeance 3 to significantly buff demon spikes right here, even talents to reduce the cooldown of demon spikes and try to make it as active as possible, you're still not gonna have demon spikes up at all times, and this mastery will still be very weak. So, Blizzard has identified and agreed with this weakness of Vengeance and is trying to get for a fix. The fix in question is that now just softly reworking Vengeance Mastery, now it reads increases your armor by a percentage of your agility, armor bonus is doubled while Demon Spikes is active. So the TLDR is that the armor bonus inside of Demon Spikes is exactly the same as you currently have, but outside of Demon Spikes you get 50% of that bonus still. So now there is a little bit of value, there is at the very least a 50% effectiveness value to your mastery even if you are not using Demon Spikes. Okay, I'm still not too big of a fan. I think it's a little bit too weak given that it doesn't give you any magical damage defensive on your mastery. It's just increasing your armor, and Demon Spikes also just increases your armor. There is nothing about magical damage reduction, so that's I never like those type of defensives. But at the very least, it's better than before. At the very least, it's more plausible to go for mastery now. It gives you more smoothened out damage taken, physical damage taken outside of Demon Spikes, etc, etc. So it's definitely a more serviceable mastery, while still not being a great mastery, okay, to be fair. Now, the other change to Demon Hunter goes to Havoc, and it's a similar type of change in the sense that it's something that Blizzard was trying to empower over the course of the new Havoc 3. This time it's not about your Demon Spikes, but it's about your Throw Glaive. As you can see, the right side of the Havoc 3 has quite a lot of Throw Glaive empowerments, either straight up increased damage to Throw Glaive, hitting multiple targets with Throw Glaive, or working with legendaries, like for example Burning Wound or Fell Bombardment. Fell Bombardment makes you tick your Immolation Aura, giving you stacks of Fell Bombardment, making your next Throw Glaive hit multiple targets, and then Burning Wound gives you the dot that you can spread with Throw Glaive. So logically, the idea is you take Fell Bombardment, you get multiple stacks of the buff, and then you throw 6 different glaives at 6 different targets, and because you have Burning Wound, they will all apply the Burning Wound to all of them. That's pretty much the use of Throw Glaive if you were playing the right side of the tree for Havoc Demon Hunter. What is the change now? Well, the change is that Fell Bombardment is going to be removed from the tree, which is kind of confusing because this was the entire reason you wanted to go for a Throw Glaive talent upgrades, because you were finishing all of those talents with Fell Bombardment, the combo of Fell Bombardment and Burning Wound. Now Fell Bombardment is gone. You get a change, you get a new talent, which is, of course, a power improvement to Throw Glaive. Throw Glaive now costs 25 Fury and throws a second glaive at the target. That's the replacement of Fell Bombardment. And also, as a result of Fell Bombardment being removed, Burning Wound will now go back to also work with your Demon's Bite and Demon Blades spreading of the dot. Because of course now you no longer have the talent that makes you hit multiple Throw Glaives at the same time, so it would be quite annoying to only have Throw Glaive spread Burning Wound now that you have lost Fell Bombardment. So now Burning Wound is back to its original spreading method. There is also a slight change to Metamorphosis. The main change of Metamorphosis is its talent improvements. Currently, your meta has a 4-minute cooldown by default, and one of your entry-level talents in the general Demon Hunter 3 is Rush of Chaos, which makes it a 3-minute cooldown. However, you also have a choice node. You have a choice node that also used to be like this. Demonic Origins, the cooldown of your meta is reduced by 2 minutes, but its duration is reduced by 10 seconds. This made it so that if you took both of these talents at the same time, you had a 1-minute cooldown Metamorphosis on a 10-second duration. This has been removed. This has been removed to a much more, you could say, boring talent, which simply gives you 1 extra minute of cooldown reduction of your Metamorphosis and gives you 10% versatility while Metamorphosis is active. So now you can take the initial Rush of Chaos talent plus this new extra cooldown reduction talent and make it a 2-minute cooldown Metamorphosis with also 10% versatility buff. It looks good, but at the same time there is kind of an issue because this is a choice node. It's a choice node with Demonic. Yeah, so it's quite unlikely. Demonic has been a very powerful talent for both Havoc and Vengeance for a long time, so it's gonna be quite a difficult task to make this new Metamorphosis talent beat Demonic, but we will see. We will see if it will be able to overthrow Demonic as the most powerful, one of the most powerful talents you have access to as a Demon Hunter. We finish for today when it comes to class changes with the disaster that is Holy Paladin. So Holy Paladin had problems because it was stuck in this limbo of trying to fix and mix the caster build of Holy Paladin centered around Flashlight and Holy Light, and the melee build, the damage build, the Crusader Strike, the Judgment, the Hammer of Wrath type of damaging melee combat Paladin. I was never a fan of these new, essentially mixing in the talent tree of Holy Paladin because I didn't think you could come up with two distinct and powerful builds at the same time. I just thought that at the end of the day, one of the two builds will be stronger, and at the end of the day, it will be the only playable one, which means that at the end of the day, all the other talents you put in the tree for the other build that will be weaker will not be played, will be forgotten and avoided for the entire expansion. So Blizzard comes with their message, which already starts me on the wrong foot, because they say, "We are excited at the prospect of offering tools for a casting-focused Holy Paladin build, but our intention is for this not to overpower the melee playstyle, but we want to find room for both to exist simultaneously without impeding each other." You know, this is the problem. They can't. This is not the same as saying, oh, we want to make an Obliterate build for Frost and a Breath of Sindragosa build for Frost exist at the same time. This is not like saying, oh, we want a Lightning Bolt, Ice Fury, single target focus build for Elemental coexist at the same time with a Chain Lightning, Fire Elemental AoE build. Those are much more connected. All of their abilities they use, all of the passives they use, the talents they want to use can be interchanged between the builds much more easily than the melee and the caster build of Holy Paladin, because some of those things will be exclusive, like casting Holy Light, casting Flash of Light are exclusive to the caster build, very often using Crusader Strike or Judgment or Hammer of Wrath to stay in melee range, to use insta-cast abilities while you're in melee range, not needing to cast one of the powers of the melee Holy Paladin build. Light of the Martyr, Word of Glory, Light of Dawn, Holy Shock, all insta-cast abilities. These type of builds are not as easily interchangeable as other classes and other specs builds. Yet, Blizzard seems intent on making this work in Dragonflight. Our goal is to intermingle spells and abilities in such a way that players are encouraged to path throughout the tree, but not feel like they must pick up undesirable talents for their build along the way. You can see here all of the list of changes that they plan to add to the talent tree. You can see also that the majority of these are going to be buffs to the caster build, because if we had to weigh them, if we had to put them on a scale together, the melee build of Paladin is of course already finished. The melee build of Paladin has been the build of Paladin for years now, so it has much less work needed to make it work. So if you look at these talents and then you just update them to how many of them are for the caster build, this is the result. You have Resplendent Light, which makes your Holy Light splash AoE heal around the target. You have Imbued Infusions, which makes consuming Infusion of Light reduce the cooldown of Holy Shock. You have Boundless Salvation to make casting Flash of Light on targets affected by Tear's Deliverance extend the duration of Tear's Deliverance, same for Holy Light. You have Divine Favor to make the healing of your next Holy Light or Flash of Light increase by 60% and cast time reduced by 30%. Veneration, Flash of Light, Holy Light and Judgment crits reset the cooldown of Hammer of Wrath. This one can also be used by the melee build because it also works with Judgment. And then Inflorescence of the Sunwell, Infusion of Light has 1 additional charge, reduces the cost of Flash of Light by an additional 30% and has a 30% chance to generate an additional Holy Power. So many additions to the caster version of Holy Paladin. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like the Holy Paladin caster build. In fact, if you were to ask me, I was more of a fan of the caster build of Holy Paladin. I'm not really been too much into the melee build version of Holy. What I don't like is the idea of trying to make them work at the same time within the same talent tree. I just think you had to just decide on one of the two and go with that. I just think that Blizzard wanted to go back to a Holy Paladin caster build, a traditional caster build, but they kind of realized that the melee build has been the way to play Paladin for the last 4 years, so they started getting cold feet at the idea of removing the build entirely. So they started going for, you know what, maybe we can keep it in the talent tree, maybe we can, leave it viable in the talent tree. So now they find themselves in this situation where they have to try to make the caster build work at the same time as the melee build work together in the same talent tree, which I just think is a waste. I just think it's going to be a waste of balancing for the spec in the end. So with this proposed set of changes to Holy Paladin, we are done for today. These have been all of the changes to the classes and specs for this Saturday. That being said, let me guys know what you think about the set of changes. In particular, of course, the Holy Paladin one is the one that I am more interested to see how it's gonna play out, because it's not just some buffs or nerfs, it's not just some talent changes, it's actually an entire style of play that gets altered in Dragonflight, so it's more important to see if it's gonna work out or not. Let me guys know if you are Holy Paladin mains, if you would rather return to a caster build rather than staying like currently to your melee version of Holy Paladin. I can of course not forget to thank my Patreon supporters, allowing me to continue to produce content for WoW, delving deeper and deeper in the beta, as usual, as the representative of the No Beta committee. You can also support this channel and myself even more by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel. That is usually the goal of a YouTube channel. And lastly, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right down at these 2 links. Now, with all of this being said and done, I am leaving you to the rest of your Saturday. Please don't cause too many problems when I'm away. I'm coming back tomorrow anyways, so just wait for me, right? Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, my what the fuck? My hand has this like dry skin peeling off, like I've been underwater for like 6 hours. What is this?